So we have to make it clean surplus accounting. If for your own benefit, if you want to do this sort of stuff, I strongly recommend that you guys buy a version of Penman's book. I'm sure older versions are available relatively cheap. Trust me, residual income model stuff did not change that much in the last 10, 15 years. Of course, they made improvements on that, but at least at your level, he spends 5 chapters on details of clean surplus accounting before he even introduces residual income model, because all that stuff you have to take care of first. And it's very well written. Accountants write really good books because they're very OCD about details by their very nature. I'm not. That's why, I mean, technically I would have been a great CPA, but I tend to overlook the details because I'm always into big picture kind of stuff. So I would never succeed as a CPA. You know, they would fire me. But when you're doing design and that sort of stuff, that's different. You can overlook details. You can have your underlings take care of the details. And I had a lot of people like that. When I worked in London, I came up with a product. I went to the risk desk and this is what you're going to do. Price it for me. I'll tell you whether I like it. You guys do all the legal work behind that. All I have to do is go to client. Here's the price. And of course, I always took advantage of my clients, but hey, they were happy. A lot of these clients, they come from, I marketed stuff to top institutional clients in Turkey, Russia, and Czechoslovakia, or Czech Republic those days. And typically, the people who work for those investment banks in those countries are at the top 0.5% of the intelligence, however you measure it, metrics. I mean, in Turkey, you couldn't even start working at a top Turkish bank, investment bank, unless you go to equivalent of Harvard in Turkey. It shouldn't be, but that's what it is. You know what you need to be to get into business school in my alma mater? You have to be in the 99.99 percentile, 99.9 percentile of all national university exam scores. Those don't measure intelligence, but it's very hard to get into. And these people tend to have high egos. So they would never admit that they wouldn't know how to price those things. But they look at the product, this is exactly what they need. So I overcharge them. They used to thank me for basically taking them to cleaners. As long as you do something that your clients wants and likes. I mean, I'm not selling this to 75-year-old retiree from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, okay? I'm selling these with the top institutional clients, with very top people handling these things. If they don't know how to price it, that's their problem. I had only one client. One time, I didn't even want to sell it, but the company made me push the product. They were doing a product where it's a bond that is based on first to default. You get a high return as long as one of the 10 countries listed does not default on their sovereign bonds. You know, these were typically Latin American countries. But if one of them defaults, you basically lose a lot of money. But since you take that risk, your return is much higher than a regular bond. And I pushed this on my clients because they made me. And I had one client. He said, "I mean, I love you. You made us a lot of money, but I have no idea how to price this thing. Plus, when something goes wrong in Brazil, I will be sleeping at home in Istanbul. So I'm not going to buy it." I said, "Thank you." And I took that conversation back to my superiors. I said, "I'm not going to sell this in Turkey." And the guy's like, "Who do you work for?" The name of the company I work for was DLJ. It's taken over by Credit Suisse later on. Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette. Who do you work for, DLJ or customers? I said, I may not be working for DLJ next year, but those guys are still my clients. I'm not going to sell them out. I was kind of I'm not going to use the term, it's to NSFW. The guy on the desk, on the derivative desk, I was the top guy in terms of producing income. So they could not afford to alienate me. But some of my other colleagues, didn't matter what they thought. Some of them didn't care anyway. But part of the reason they weren't that successful because they didn't care. If you don't care about your client, you can't do stuff that is good for your client, which increases their business. In 6 months, I tripled the income that they earned from my area in the previous 12 months. And they couldn't even understand it. There was this Austrian guy, of course, he was named Hans, and he comes in and he says he was a little bit of a racist and xenophobe. Go figure, an Austrian guy working in London being a xenophobe to a Turkish guy. He was probably at least a sympathizer Nazi. So he couldn't handle that a non-Aryan guy came here and dominated the whole desk. He says, you come here and you're dominating the entire desk. How are you doing it? He wants to learn. I said, you're not going to like my answer. She said, please tell me. I said, I'm not you. I used to be a lot more obnoxious. I still am, but I can back that up, man. If you can back that up, you can be an a-hole in financial business. It never plays well in academia. I mean, even though when you're right, nobody listens to you. I kind of had a nickname for myself. I called myself Cassie. You guys know about the Cassandra syndrome? Anybody into classics? Cassandra is one of sisters of Paris and Hector, the princes of Troy. Okay, Cassandra had angered one of their goddesses, I think Athena, if I'm not mistaken, and Athena put a curse on her. And the curse was she was cursed to know everything that's going to happen, but nobody was going to believe her. You know, when Paris was uh, going to Sparta, to be at the wedding of Agamemnon's brother, she sees everything. She tells King Priam, don't send Paris. All this is going to happen. He doesn't believe her. Paris goes, comes with what's her face? Helena, was it? Helen, yeah. We call it Helena back in Middle East. And of course, the whole Trojan War starts because of that. So I kept saying, people, this is what's going to happen. Nobody believed me until 3 years later. For example, we had an MBA program, the design before this, and I looked at the design. I looked at it. I said, in addition to being pedagogically rather unsound, because students have to take classes that were 3.5 hours long net, but once a night, but they were 2 credit hours. And I said, this thing actually loses money at its max design capacity. You didn't have to be a complicated accountant. All you had to do is add numbers. An average business professor cost EKU at that time over $150,000. Teaching one of those classes is 1/6 of your teaching load. That means your cost for teaching that class is $25,000, right? So you got to be able to make $25,000 in tuition for that, for a 2 credit hour class. A lot of our MBA students are EKE employees, so technically they pay nothing. And typically we have a lot of GAs, so they don't pay much either. It was clear. That thing, despite all my objections, passed. In fact, one of the proponents of that was a very close friend of mine. He was going to benefit a lot from that as a person because they were going to promote him. And if you are on KTRS, your pension depends upon the highest 5 years of compensation. After I got it defeated in the faculty senate, he comes to me and says, you're dead to me. His wife, which was our AA, was one of my closest friends. And 3 years later, a few months before he retired, he goes to my event chair and says, "Man, Zach was right about this program. We're losing money left and right." I didn't have to be Einstein to figure it out. People just had an incentive not to see that. So sometimes people don't want to see what you say. In academia, what's the cost of not doing that? Are they going to charge me for coming up with a program that's so bad if I'm the one who came up? No. Typically, these people are tenured professors. The worst that they can ever do to them is not give them a raise above inflation, which is what they've been doing ever since EKU has been in existence, pretty much. So there are no incentives. But in financial sector, you do something like that, company loses money, bye-bye. You're going to be fired. All right? So these things matter. On Wednesday, tell me some companies that you guys are interested in. Make sure they're not very small companies so that we could get reliable financial data, and we could work on those. In fact, if you tell me ahead of time, I'll prepare stuff with that information. I'll use only one of them as an example, but we could post the results for the other. I'll see you guys Wednesday. There's no jeopardy this